when people of our generation first hear about a company, first thing they're doing is going to social media. Second thing might be their website. But if you don't have either two, one of those things, they're not going to apply to that job. They're not going to take a call. They're not interested in your company. They don't even know what you do. They don't know who you are.
All right, what's up, everybody? This is the Blue Collar Creative Podcast. We're on a mission to take blue collar and make it aspirational again. So we're here with Corey Guy, and he's CEO and founder of Ground Up Construction Recruiting, based out of Phoenix, Arizona. And we're really excited to have some conversations here around what companies can do to hire better talent, to attract better talent, and also what we can do as employees as well in the industry, anyone in that position, to make themselves more attractive to companies that are hiring. So, Corey, what's up?
What's up, Ryan? What's up, Phil? Appreciate you guys having me on.
Good to have you here, man. Yeah, excited to get into it.
Yeah, right on. Me too.
So, Corey, how did Ground Up start? Like, how'd you get into recruiting and construction recruiting specifically?
Man, yeah, it's kind of like every other recruiter in the industry. You don't grow up wanting to be a recruiter. You just kind of fall into it. So, yeah, I mean, I got into it almost 4 years ago without even knowing it was an industry at the time. So prior to getting into recruiting, I worked in insurance for 7 years, was a insurance broker selling like work comp, general liability, auto insurance, stuff like that to construction companies. And yeah, specifically focused on the construction industry, mostly working with general contractors and subcontractors, some developers here and there. Um, but then my wife is an occupational therapist by trade, and she decided to take a travel job. So we couldn't stay in Arizona anymore, and I couldn't work in insurance. It was more just like localized. So I kind of saw from like an outside perspective of what recruiting was, because she worked with a healthcare recruiter to get that job. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, there's got to be something like that for construction, I'm sure. And so just kind of doing some research, I applied to a few different construction specific recruiting jobs, not knowing at the time, like what was the difference between a staffing company and a direct hire company. It was just kind of applying and seeing what would happen, trying to get something remote. And anyways, a company ended up taking a chance on me. And that's kind of how I got initiated into the recruiting industry there.
Nice. What was the draw to construction specifically? Like you mentioned, that was like part of it early on. Even there must be something like this for construction. What was the draw specifically to construction?
Yeah, I grew up in a smaller town in Nebraska, was just kind of always around it. Never directly like worked for a construction company, but here and there helping buddies out, their dads out, my dad out with just like construction stuff. And then when I got into insurance, nobody was focused on construction in my office. Most of what they did was agriculture. I was like, oh man, there's so much opportunity we're missing out here in the Nebraska market, just because no one's chasing after it. And I kind of had to convince my boss at the time to be able to let me do construction, because he didn't like chasing construction work for the insurance industry. It was just kind of like the industry, like on public tech stuff, low bid, wins the job a lot of time. And that's kind of how it was their mindset with insurance too. So I had to convince him to kind of let, me chase construction. And, I just fell in love with it, fell in love with the people, fell in love with the work. So I knew, like, going into recruiting, I was like, I have such a network built up now. I have a knowledge of the industry. I can speak the lingo. I love the people in it. So I just want to, keep focusing on construction and see what I can do with that.
Yeah, that's cool. That really resonates with us. Is like that. I love the industry, love the people in it. That's one of the things that got us into the niche that we're going down. It's like servicing blue collar companies. Is like we just love working with those people. They're really awesome. They're fun to be around. They're fun to work with. They've got some cool stories, and that really resonates with me. So
yeah, for sure,
that's
man.
awesome. So I guess for people who don't know, like people who are outside the industry or looking to get into the industry or whatever, could you just explain, like, I think there's a big misconception, or at least lack of understanding. Like, I think it's kind of just almost a one of the best kept secrets, so to speak, is like, what are the opportunities available in construction? Like, what can your career look like doing this, like being in this industry?
And there's so many different opportunities out there you can take, whether you want to be in the field or the office or, start from the bottom and work your way up to being an owner one day. And I feel like, the industry is starting to get back now, man. There's younger people wanting to get into the trades, people like yourself, doing videography, you know, doing a lot of stuff on social media. It's capturing the attention now of the younger generations, and it's starting to come back. It feels like, there was a period where, you people were kind of looked down on. Unfortunately, if you went into construction, a lot of the times it was kind of um, like a last thing that you would kind of look into. And, even growing up, like my dad would say, like, oh, go to college. Like, you don't want to break your back for a dollar. Don't get into construction. You don't want to do it. And, you know, but there is so much opportunity in it right now, especially just because so many people over the years have gotten out of it, didn't get into it. So many people are retiring now where whether it be on the skilled labor side, carpenters, electricians, plumbers, there's so much money to be had with like even just a small company, say 1 to 10 people. There's so much, money to be had localized. Or, say you go to college and you want to get more into the office type of stuff. You want to be a project manager or an estimator. You want to work in pre-construction and design, or, you kind of want to work from yourself, from a laborer to a superintendent to, general superintendent and managing teams and stuff like that. Or on the heavy civil side, start as a laborer, start, being a haul truck driver, getting on equipment, leading teams from that end of things, and then rising up through the ranks from there. Your career can go so many different ways. Or like myself, I mean, I've never directly worked for a construction company per se, but I specifically sold insurance to construction companies. Now I recruit for construction companies. If you like law, you can be a construction attorney, or be a fractional CFO for construction companies. There's so many, ways about it. You can go, if you like construction, if you're passionate about the industry, the people, you can do anything in it, man.
That's eye opening. I think that's a message that not a lot of people fully understand, maybe because of the older generation saying, hey, go to college, do this, do that, right? Like, don't go into, like, maybe that's a backup option for you, but it's not your first choice. When you look at the opportunity within that, do you have any like examples of like in your recruiting of like an individual who you've seen go enter into maybe like the labor side, right, as a laborer, and then work their way up? Like, do you have any specific stories of people who have been able seen do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll chime in. I mean, especially at the superintendent level with these older guys that are, 50s, 60s, sometimes hitting 70s now, where they started as laborers. Maybe they worked for their dad's company for 5, 10 years at a labor level, started doing carpentry and then became a superintendent, and just, have loved working with their hands their entire industry, or their entire careers rather. And then, have started their own companies. And, now, we have multiple clients where that's kind of the career progression they've had is, starting out a laborer and then just being in the field for 20, 30 years, starting their own company. So they have all that expertise, and, working alongside those guys, helping them recruit now those are some of the best guys to work with. They're just down to earth guys. They know the industry in and out, that they know the types of people that they want to hire. Um, and even just like on the skilled labor side, you go and get a 2-year plumbing degree, and you can become a journeyman, start your own company. Say you got 4 or 5 guys working for you. You can make a really, really good living just doing something like that. You don't have to go work for 100, 200 person company to make a decent wage. There's a lot of different avenues you can go.
Yeah, what are some of those? Well, I was as you're talking, I was just thinking about the financial benefit. I think is very evident, right? A lot of people talk about, you know, being able to come out of school, get in, you know, to maybe an apprenticeship program, go through that, and then come out and start making six figures. That's said a lot. And can you speak to the financial side of that a little bit? Just what's like the average income, you know, that you see across like the trades for someone like coming out of an apprenticeship?
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't deal a ton with people coming out of apprenticeships or even the skilled trade stuff. A lot of what we work on the recruiting side is like project engineers, project managers, superintendents, estimators, executives, stuff like that. But you know, we still have those conversations with companies and you know what they're paying their people on this trade side. So you know, coming out of the 2 year apprenticeship program, depending where you're at geography wise, you know, you could be making anywhere from like $30 to $60 an hour, you know, depending on the trade. You know, we get into welding or underwater welding, you know, you're making 150K a year, you know, easily. Um, you know, it just depends, you know, what the trade is, geography, stuff like that. But the financial side, it's there for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and so a lot of people I think hear that and they're like, okay, that sounds cool. You know, let me go through this, and then, you know, construction isn't necessarily pretty. You know, there is
Yeah.
the hard work, right? You're getting out in the field and you're breaking your back at times. But what have you seen as like just in the conversations you've had with companies from a culture shift, from like a safety perspective, or some of the things that are changing in the construction industry to allow for more longevity for someone in the trades?
Yeah. I think companies are starting to be a little bit more transparent with like what goes on a day-to-day basis in construction companies because yeah, it is hard work and you know, social media can kind of glamorize it at times and you know, make it look pretty, make it, you know.
Yeah, that's our job to some degree, but we also want to show that authentic, real side of construction. That it you know it can be grueling at times. You're out in the elements, but there's a lot of innovation happening.
Right.
You know, from the tools that we use to the technology that's implemented. Obviously, the finances are there, but I'm curious, and I'm trying to dig into this a little more in my understanding, and maybe you have something on this point. But what are like even the mental benefits, right? Like the health benefits of like working with your hands, and you know, not necessarily just sitting at a desk and being dormant and you know hitting a keyboard all day. But I'm sure that that's like there's benefits to that side of it as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, historically, construction has been an industry where, you know, drugs and alcohol has been abused. But I think companies are starting to realize that more and more and be proactive about that and how they can help people through that, as far as like investing in mental health care, um, you know, um, consulting with different advisors and therapists and stuff like that, as well as like you know paying for gym memberships, making sure their guys are healthy, paying for healthy lunches, and really just like getting people on the job site and you know maybe they don't work out, but the physical benefits of you know the physical labor is there as long as you know you're eating healthy and everything like that. You know your physical work throughout the day can be kind of your workout and stuff. Um, and I think more and more companies are starting to realize that and are starting to invest in that type of stuff. Where kind of I mentioned, you know, some companies are investing in gym memberships with people or at their corporate office building the gym. You know, just introducing you know their people into more of a healthy lifestyle just because historically it hasn't been a healthy profession, but it's definitely moving in that direction.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah, if you're is just kind of piggybacking off of that, like say you were talking to a company that just came to you and they're like, "Hey, we're looking to fill a bunch of roles. We're trying to become more attractive to top talent." Like, what are some of those trends you see that people are doing, or some of those things you'd recommend that you see actually move the needle for companies when they're trying to attract really quality people?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I mean, you gotta be able to compete. You gotta have the salary and the benefits there. Um, it's hard to attract someone to your company if you can't be competitive, at least salary wise. So start there. If you're a smaller company, start now. You can sell your vision and your mission of the company and attract a certain type of person to your company from that level. But if you're a middle market size company, you definitely have to have the compensation there. Investing in training and development is huge now. Um, Top companies are putting um, a lot of investment in these areas as well as safety as well. Um, some of the top companies now, like even just have it on their website of like start as a project engineer or assistant superintendent, and it'll have kind of like this will be your career progression over how many years, assistant super to senior super to general superintendent. So advertising that and laying that career path out to younger individuals that can be attractive to someone. Um, Investing in great leaders in your company. So many people end up leaving companies just because their boss, isn't the greatest leader. They've never been trained on how to be a leader. Sure, maybe they can, you know, maybe they're a good carpenter, but they never had management training or never had been in leadership training, anything like that to really understand people on a personal level, building relationships with your people is key if you want to retain them. With that, having regular feedback to your employees and, you know, periodic like reviews of how an individual is doing inside of their company. Because everyone wants to know, when am I going to get a promotion? When am I going to get a raise? So trying to stay on top of that stuff instead of like, you get an employee that's kind of fed up. Oh, I haven't gotten raised in 2 years. I haven't gotten promoted. They go out and talk to a company. They talk to a recruiter like myself, and then they tell their boss at that point they're going to be leaving. Then they're like, oh, let's stop. We can give you a raise. We want to keep you. We value you. So companies that are ahead of the curve on that, more proactive rather than reactive, are going to be able to retain people a lot better. um, Implementing new technology, always, staying ahead on that of competitors, that can be important to some people not. But trying to stay competitive that in that area as well. Recognizing your people when they're doing a good job, providing bonuses, things along that line. I think those are all really good areas where you can, retain your people.
Yeah, from the sounds of it, honestly, it sounds like a lot of it is like it's that little stuff. It's the little things like, hey, recognize people who are doing a good job. Pay people at a market rate, or if you can, slightly above market rate. Just like do all the little things. It doesn't sound like there's anything that's like, hey, there's some silver bullet that's going to make you like, hey, you're way more attractive to new hires than anyone else. It's more like just do all the little things right. Get your culture right. Get your systems right so that things are set up for people to succeed. Is what it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, people want to be paid well, they want to be treated well. So if you can do those two things, you're going to do a heck of a job of keeping your people around.
Yeah, and I think you said it well as well with the kind of that showcasing a career arc, like a
Hmm.
trajectory, is
Yeah.
it's good for people to see like, hey, there's room to grow here. There's something to get like forward in my career, and I can actually take my desire for excellence or my ambition and point it in a direction. To that end, like, where do you see or what's kind of like an average timeline you see for that career growth? Like, what do you see in the industry? Like, if somebody takes a position, how long do they stay in that position before it's like, hey, we're getting ready to move people up? Like, what's normal there?
Yeah, man, I think I read a stat the other day, like the average tenure in construction is 4 years, which I mean, some people might think that's low, some people might think that's high. Um, I'm not exactly sure where I stand on that, but as far as like, people being loyal at a company and, having a good um, career trajectories from there, it kind of depends on if you're starting at a smaller, middle, or large company. If you're at a big, large company, it can take 15, 20 years to get to like a senior director type of level just because there's so many ladders you got to go through to get to that point. But, if you're working for a company, say 25, 50 people, you can start out of college with a construction management degree and start as, say, an assistant project manager, get promoted to a PM after, say, 3, 4 years, be a project manager. If you want to stay in the office, great. You can either stay that project management route and become a senior PM after, say, another 4 or 5 years, or say you want to dabble in estimating or pre-construction. It just kind of depends. Yeah, I mean, if you stay with a good company, stay loyal to them, you can progress quickly and be at a senior type of level in, say, 10, 12 years.
Well, yeah, that's pretty. I mean, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
There's a lot of industries where it's tough to move up that quickly. But I think you're right when you look at company size and go, oh yeah, there's a lot of different layers in larger companies. So that's something to consider. Like, there's a lot of benefits to larger companies as well, but there's there's also like different layers to get that career path, like to elevate that career path. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
there's advantages to smaller and mid-sized companies as well.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one of the things that I would recommend, younger people getting into the industry is do your research on companies when you first start applying for construction companies. Like, figure it out. Like, is your personality more geared towards a smaller type of company where maybe everything's not figured out, but you're going to be able to estimate, you're going to be able to do project management, you're going to be able to get in the field, you're going to have your hands in so many different things and get so much experience. Whereas if you choose to go with like a larger company, there's so much more structure there. So, your tasks aren't going to be as much. You're going to be, head down kind of on one set thing. So you're not going to be able to see as much of the industry as, say, if you choose to work at a smaller company right away. So yeah, if you're getting into the industry right away, definitely do your research of the companies and like how the structures work. Um, and there's a lot of different details that go into different jobs and what you can do at different companies of different sizes.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I saw something you posted on LinkedIn the other day about companies getting their website and socials in order because candidates are doing a lot of research there. Like, that's you see a job posting, and I know this is from my age group. I'm 31. You look at my age group. That's the first thing I do if I see a job posting. Like, when I was looking, it's like, all right, let me go check them out on social. Let me go check out their website. Let me learn about them and see if I even want to apply. So and especially when it's so competitive, like you said, there's a lot of openings. There's a lot of good jobs out there. How important is it for companies to be staying on top of their social media platforms, be staying on top of their website, and having that content that puts out like, hey, here's who we are, here's what you can expect?
Man, you got to be doing it, man. There's a lot of construction companies that aren't doing it. They're doing good. They have a good market share, but their competitors at some point are going to start getting the best of the best people. Like you said, Ryan, like when people of our generation, first hear about a company, first thing they're doing is going to social media. Second thing might be their website, but if you don't have either one of those things, they're not going to apply to that job. They're not going to take a call. They're not interested in your company. They don't even know what you do. They don't know who you are. Uh, if you invest in, social media, you invest in a good website that tells people about who you are, what your mission is, what your vision is, your culture, highlights your people, is just super transparent. I think that's what a lot of people like is transparency these days. If you kind of give a deep dive into your company, who you are, what you stand for, people are going to be attracted to that. People are going to work for you. And, if they see videos of your guys out on job sites, pictures, people having a good time in your company, that's super appealing. So, what you guys are doing in your company, it's great. It's helping push the industry forward, and it's helping people realize, construction's cool. Maybe I should consider getting into it and not having it as a, last kind of consideration if things don't work out for me.
Yeah, more of a first option, not a last
Yeah,
resort. That's what we want to
absolutely.
make it.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to make it and make it an aspirational thing. Make it something that people are excited to do because there is value in it. There's value in the work. There's value in the people, and it's a good industry. Like it needs more of a light shown on it because there are a lot of good opportunities, like we've talked about, and there's a need for good workers. There's a need for good leaders, especially like that's huge, and that's in every industry. But when you've got a need for talent, there's a big need for leaders too. So
Maybe on that point too, Corey, I was just curious, like, a big part of it is to build the workforce and to rebuild the workforce is to attract people from other industries to the construction industry. And you'd mentioned like attorneys, you had mentioned, like people who maybe have skill sets in other areas and they're practicing in other areas. What are some of those potentially just a step this way that we could like pull them in? I know tech's been mentioned before, but what are you seeing from that perspective?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thing, Phil, is like there's so many different avenues people can go these days with their careers. I mean, tech being a huge one of them. Like, how can we do a good job as an industry collectively of, introducing people to construction at, a younger age and you know, getting them passionate about it at a young age and wanting to move in that direction instead of chasing tech or you know not that tech isn't important or healthcare isn't important. It's all important, but like construction is such a cool industry. We build roads for doctors to get to the hospitals. We build plumbing and electrical for residential homes for people to have a good living, a roof over their head. I think using what you guys are doing from a video standpoint and helping to attract people and understand these are all the cool things that construction does. That's how we can help pull people from other industries and help solve that workforce development issue that we have. um yeah, I mean, it's an sorry, what's that, right?
we met with someone who's in the civil contracting, and one of the things they mentioned when we were just having a conversation about workforce development. One of the things they mentioned was how do we take that young kid who's great at tech, who's looking to get into something big, and how do we make them go, oh yeah, go from I want to work at Tesla or Apple or Microsoft or whatever, or Google, to hey, let's be in this industry. Like there's technology that needs to be developed for this. There's autonomous, like they're starting to do autonomous equipment. There's all these different tech fields that need development just as much. And how do we convince people to go from all these seen as very prestigious industries or companies to this is extremely valuable as well, and you can make a great living doing it.
Yeah.
That's the question.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough problem to solve, man. But I think a lot of it comes down to of like being transparent of what we do day in and day out in construction, allowing your people to have their phones on job sites to be able to snap pictures, to take videos, post it to their social media. Just because there's not a ton out there, now there's starting to be, as you know over the last 5-10 years, it's become more prevalent. But before that, not too many companies were worried about doing that. If you got caught with your phone on a job site, you might be fired. Um, So just highlighting everything that we do in construction, I think that's one of the most important things that we can be doing right now, especially, you know, to try to get people from other industries as well as starting to attract people, that are at that younger age, elementary school, middle school, not waiting until high school until, they can get into different, programs during during high school, but attract them at a younger age for sure.
That got me thinking about some of the job seeker stuff. As far as we're talking about people who want to get into the industry, looking to
Mhm.
either move up the career ladder or just get their first job. Um, what are companies looking for, and how can if I were 18-year-old Ryan looking to get a job in the industry, and I was like, hey Corey, what do I do to make myself more appealing to companies? What would you say?
Man, give them a call. Give the owner a call. Give the hiring manager a call. Don't just apply to a job post, but take initiative and reach out to them. If you tell them, you're an 18-year-old kid, you're talking to the owner of a company or an executive of a company, you want to come work for them, that's going to resonate with them. They're not just going to hang up the phone on you. They're going to take your call. They're going to talk to you. They're going to have you talk to the right person to help you get hired there. It's because nobody's being that, man. Um, they might apply to a job and, hope to get a call one day. But, if you take initiative, if you be proactive and, you do the outreach and, you sell them on yourself, what you want to do, where you want your career to go, show that you can be a loyal employee, that's one of the best things that you could do if you're 18 years old and you want to start in construction, call the owner of that company, tell them you want to come work for them.
Is there anything companies along those lines are doing for like continued education? Like, are they, if you get in at 18, but you want to pursue your construction management degree, are there companies out there who are helping you do that in any way, or what are some of those things that they're doing to continue education for their people?
Yeah, I mean, there's some, not a ton that at least I've personally seen where they'll pay for you to go back to college. I don't think that happens all too often. Um, I've talked to some people where they have a construction management degree. Their company wants them to get into leadership, so they'll like go pay for them to get an MBA or take some leadership training like that. But not necessarily like a 4-year degree they'll pay for. But if you get in with the right companies and they're truly trying to build a long-standing company, a lot of them now are investing in leadership training. So that's a huge thing. Starting out, you know, as your career, you might not get into that right away, but as you progress and you know become kind of middle of the company, and they see you as leadership quality, they'll invest in that side of you, as well as safety training, stuff like that.
Yeah. And I think it's good for young people coming into the industry to not just put their head down and like go to work, but continue to like keep their eyes open for like that next step for them, right? Like, how
Hmm.
can I become a leader in this industry? Otherwise you might just get head down and kind of lost in the work, day in and day out. But how do you further advance your skill set? Like that, those leadership qualities that you can develop. So I think that's one area where the construction culture, can do a better job of like continuing to promote from within, right? Like maybe you do come in at 18, but then that path might be a long path, but there's a clear, like you said, a proactive approach from companies to grow their people. And maybe it's not, through college because it's kind of a broken, flawed system in a lot of ways, but through trade schools, through leadership training, through some of the educational options that are coming up just from, I know like there's brands like BuildWit out there with training, platforms, right, that are
Hmm.
really helping to develop people more. So
Yeah.
investing in those types of platforms, I see as
Hmm.
a really helpful thing if you're coming into the industry.
Yeah. As well as, I mean, taking ownership yourself and, reading books, self educating. Companies want to hire, A team talent. They want the unicorn. So you can't just rely on a company to teach you everything. You got to, take ownership over your own life and go out there and, build yourself up to make yourself look at it as attractive as possible to a company, because there's so much competition out there.
Yeah, that's good.
I think that that kind of, when you were talking about calling an owner if you're looking for a job, it's one of those things. Like all of us, especially I think in our generation, have heard our parents or grandparents say, "Oh, if you want a job, just go take a resume to the office and drop it off. Like they'll hire you on the spot." And it's like, honestly, that doesn't work as well anymore. But I think the principle behind that is initiative. It's like, show that extra interest that other people aren't showing. And so, like you said, like taking that time to do a phone call, or reach out to the owner somehow, or the hiring manager or whatever, and just say, hey, like, I'm actually interested in this. And most people don't do that. So I think it's that same principle still stands. It's just that it looks a little different. But then to your point, Corey, is like, that carries on to the next position as well, whether that's being promoted or like finding your next job. Is like, take that initiative to invest in yourself, to how can I get better so that the next time this comes around, or the next time I'm interested in doing something more, I'll be ready, to whatever extent you can be ready. Nobody's ever fully prepared for something new, but you can prepare yourself as best you can.
Yeah, and also like with that, I mean, always be building relationships. Whether you're starting out in your career, middle of your career, end of your career, be building relationships with other people in the industry. You never know when, a cool opportunity might come out, and people are gonna directly reach out to you rather it be the other way around. You get to know people at companies, and an opportunity comes by, they're going to be the ones to first reach out to you rather than you have to go out and apply to the job. They know who you are. They know what you can do. They want to hire you. So always be building relationships, and trying to reach out to new people.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, we every year we cover a conference called Construction Leadership Conference for one of our association clients. And so there's all these big labor leaders. There's giant GC leaders and all that stuff there. And you hear the conversations, and it's always like, we need more leaders. We need new leaders. We need younger leaders. We need people to come up who are excited about the next phase, the future of this industry, and who can lead us into that. And so, just sitting there listening to that, we're always like, man, it's so important. And then, as a business owner as well, you look at that and just like, leadership is so important at all levels. You just have to have people who aspire to take ownership of stuff, who want to like be at some level responsible for what they're assigned. And so, I think it's really cool, the conversation around leadership, but I think that also plays into, we had a conversation earlier before this on a different call where we were talking about like people starting a job, and then they might come out as a journeyman, like you said, as a plumber. I actually know a guy who came out as a plumber. He worked for a place for 2 years. He was a journeyman, started his own business. First year, $2 million. Like, the opportunities are crazy there. Can you just speak to that, hey, the progression of, you could learn the trade somewhere, you could start your own business. There's all kinds of opportunity if you're willing to do the thing others aren't.
Yeah, that's a big piece of it, man. Like, you can go, into a trade, you can go, become a journeyman, and, work at a company, and, work with your hands your entire career, and enjoy your life. That's a good life. But if you have, aspirations of beyond that, you have to put in the work to learn the business side of it if you want to start your own company one day. How I, kind of alluded to when we first started, there's so much opportunity out there right now for people to start, trade companies, just because so many are going out of business. So many people are retiring these days. So many shoes need to be filled. Um, but just working in the trades day in and day out, you're not going to learn the business side of what it takes to start your own company. You have to take ownership of that, and, after work, read books, listen to podcasts, kind of how I mentioned earlier, call people up, build relationships. How did you do this? How do you do that? Just always be learning. And then eventually, I mean, you kind of just got to take the risk and do it. Um, you know, no one's gonna do it for you. No one's there to save you. You got to take it on, and if you truly want to start your own business one day, you got to jump one day.
Yeah. How often, I guess this could be an interesting question. It may not. It depends on how much experience you've seen with this personally. But like, how often do you see a company that is kind of looking for, hey, this hire is the future of the company. Like we're getting old, we're looking to retire soon. Maybe we're looking to sell the business, but we want to hire somebody who we can train, and maybe they want to buy this thing. Maybe they want to, it's like, how often do you see that kind of stuff?
Yeah, a lot of that is more like the executive type of recruiting stuff, which we do some of. We haven't had too many hires where it's like this is going to be the person who's ultimately going to take over the company one day. We fill a lot of positions where it's like they're working side by side with the owner, and maybe 20, 30 years down the road, something could happen. Um, but I got a good example of a new client we're about to be starting to work with here in Arizona. So this guy, the company's 20 years old. He started in the company 6 years ago, I believe as a project manager or senior project manager. Bought the company from the owner 4 years ago. So he's owned the company 4 years now. It's a smaller company. They do about 25 million a year, and they only got 8 employees.
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, but the owner is still in the day to day. He's doing all the estimates. He's doing all the project management over all the projects. And so he's looking for a key hire right now of a project manager to work side by side with him to, be kind of the lead project manager at this point, and that could, ultimately turn into down the road being a director, being a VP, being a co-owner. You never know. But yeah, I mean, what you're kind of getting at, Ryan, is those key hires of what companies are looking for. The next leaders of their companies. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of the time why companies choose to work with recruiters, because they might not necessarily have that relationship in place. They want that unicorn. They want that top 1% in the industry in their market to be able, you know, come into their company and one day take it over or lead a department or something like that. We love helping those types of companies.
Yeah, so if you're watching this right now and you're not happy with where you're at, call Corey, right? Come
right.
on, let's go.
We got you.
That's awesome. How do you go
Just
about
out of-
finding
just out of
someone like that, Corey? Like
That's
you're
what I
if
was about to ask.
oh man, see, I beat you to it. But yeah, how do you go about finding that individual, Corey?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you could put it like a key term on it. Headhunting is what we do. It's, cold calling individuals, trying to sell them on an opportunity, building relationships over years, getting to know, what people want next in their career, you know, whether it be, we're developing relationships with people right out of college, or we're developing, relationships with executives of companies. We're talking to people every single day and building those relationships with companies. That way, when we do have an opportunity, we have so much information on this person already. A company reaches out to us, say, we need a VP of project management. It's like, oh, I got 2, 3, 4 people I can call right now that, would be interested in this opportunity that, could fit culture wise. Let me get them on the phone. Let me tell them about the opportunity. Um, or even say just like from a superintendent level, developing relationships with those types of people, having project lists, finding out the types of projects they really enjoy working on, what their expertise is in, and say we have a client that's looking for a healthcare specific superintendent. Well, we have, say 8, 9, 10 superintendents we could call today that have the type of experience that you're looking for these healthcare facilities. So Phil, we invest in software to be able to get people's cell phone numbers, email addresses, um, to be able to do kind of the headhunting piece of what we do in recruiting, as well as, developing our social media followings. People reach out to us every single day for jobs, connecting with them, getting resumes, stuff like that. We have, thousands of candidates on file where we can tap into that, any single time to be able to, introduce them to companies, introduce them to opportunities. And then, that's where the kind of the matchmaking comes into not only helping companies look for, individuals that have the exact expertise that they're looking for, the project experience, but the match in, you know, leadership quality wise, they match in culture wise, they, after talking to them about a specific company, they like where the company's at, they like where the direction's headed. Our job as a company's recruiter is really to become an extension of them. So learning the ins and outs of their company, their past, their present, their future, their benefits program, stuff like that. That way, when we're talking to candidates, it's as if they're talking to an internal employee.
Yeah, two follow up questions on that. So, how long does that process usually take? I'm sure it's role specific, whether or not there's a ton of good candidates out there. But how long does that process usually take? And also, like for you, since you're becoming almost an extension of that company, how do you know when it's like what's that moment where have you ever had that where you feel like, oh, this is a home run? Like this person's just going to connect with this role, and like this is the perfect fit.
Yeah.
How do you know that?
So your first question, it kind of depends on the type of the position, geography, what the company does, if people in their, city know who they are, or if it's when we're reaching out to people, that's kind of the first time they're hearing that company's name. But on average, we've had our company for almost 2 years now, and doing metrics on it, I think our average is around like 50 or 60 days as soon as like a company signs an agreement with us to when a candidate starts a position. So yeah, typically within a couple months we'll have someone hired for a company, give or take. Some roles can take 1 to 2 weeks, some can take 3 months. A lot of different factors go into it. And then, sorry, what was the second question there?
Sorry, yeah, long question. The second question is like, have you ever had that moment where it was just like you could tell talking to the person that like this is a home run fit, like this is gonna be perfect. I can't wait to get this in front of the company as like a recommendation. And if so, what made that decision? Like, what gave you that feeling? What was the factor?
Mhm. Yeah, it happens every once in a while. It's mm, I wish I could say it happens more often than it does. But a lot of it comes down to, you know, developing the relationships over time with candidates. A lot of it is like right timing for people. Maybe someone just, had a conversation with their company and they got promoted. So it's like, it takes that person out of the mix. Or someone just is waiting on a bonus that's going to hit in 2 months. So, that can be, a factor that goes into it. But, we've had some companies where, it's a new client for us and they, sign an agreement with us for a particular position, and I have a really good relationship with a couple of candidates that I know is just going to be a home run for this person. That's one of the best days in recruiting. It's like, oh, I already have someone for you that I can send to you, tomorrow. Yeah, I wish it happened more like that, but it doesn't all the time.
What do you find is like that kind of X factor, I guess, that gives that perfect fit? Is it like aligned on culture? Is it mission? Is it just like, hey, this is the right situation geographically, or what do you find is a common factor there?
Yeah. A lot of it is, a lot of people could be a good fit experience wise. Um, but it comes down to most of the time, is it a good culture fit? Do people like being around this person? Can this person lead a team? It comes down to that, a lot of times over like experience. Because experience can be taught, but someone's personality, the way someone carries themselves, that can't be taught to someone. So, um, yeah, like if I get a candidate on the phone and like they're really good on the phone, I'm like, oh, this person is going to get along with this guy so well. Like I have to introduce these people, whether or not, they're going to hire this person or not. Like I know these people are going to connect. They could be friends. It's magic when that happens, man.
Yeah, I think that you said that really well, in a way that I think gives a lot of people that little encouragement or hope or whatever, that like, hey, if I like, it's not all about experience. You look at these roles, and it's about fit, it's about personality, it's about work ethic, and it's not just about like, oh yeah, you've been doing this for 15 years, like
Mhm.
companies are willing to train people if they can find the right culture fit, the right work ethic, the right passion for the role or the industry. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's kind of funny. Like I'll have conversations with like superintendents specifically. They've been in the industry for 20, 25 years and they're like, oh, I can build anything. And it's like they've done maybe retail tenant improvements most of their career, but we're hiring someone to take on $100 million healthcare facility or a $500 million data center. you know yeah, yeah, you have good experience but not experience in a particular area. Or yeah, kind of back to what you were saying, Ryan, there, like on the culture fit. Like, yeah, you might have all the experience that they're looking for, but I can tell just from the conversation that we're having in the past 5-10 minutes, I know you're just not gonna fit in best with these owners or this team here.
From the recruiting side, like we're like obviously in video production, we're trying to uh, make this a more desirable career path, shine a light on like some of the awesome opportunities, shine a light on the culture that can exist and the roles that exist. Like, uh, what do you see from companies like leveraging video in their recruiting? Do you see any companies like taking a lead in that? Do you see it being effective? Like, what do you see from a media standpoint in companies like doing for hiring and recruiting?
Yeah, you mentioned BuildWit earlier. Like, you could call me a BuildWit fanboy if you wanted to. Like, I love what they've done. I had followed Aaron since he was in here in Arizona just by himself, and then what he's been able to build his company into today, and like that's had such a positive effect on the industry, and so many companies are learning from what they've done in video and photos and stuff like that. Where yeah, there are a lot of companies now that are moving that way, and it's attracting people to their company. It's getting their brand name out there. People start following their teams on social media, start following along what they're doing. So they already know, who the company is, who the leaders are. That's why, companies that are taking advantage of video right now are finding success in recruiting without, having to spend so much money on, recruiters or job posts, stuff like that, just because people are already coming to them after watching their videos and, following them on social media. Um, so yeah, I mean, yeah, if you're a company, you're not taking advantage of that right now. I mean, your competitors are, and, eventually, your people might end up going to them from seeing their videos like that.
I think culture is a variety of things like that have an influence over us in different ways, right? Like every brand that's out there, that's well known, right, has some level of like influence on our culture in some way, right? And so when you think of like BuildWit and the influence they're having on the construction culture, they've created a media, a presence, right? That's everybody recognizes and sees, but then they bring like Ariat in to sponsor one of their biggest events, and then that then creates like people who wear Ariat jeans and whatever else. That creates like this sense of, oh, this is cool, like this is the brands that I identify with and want to be a part of. And so then it's like the more we can do that, I think, as a media company specifically, but then that turns into more of those in-person events where you can build relationships, brands get involved. It's all going to help like propel the industry forward and create better opportunity for people in this industry to grow, better culture, and that should have an influence. And I think it's cool to see, BuildWit, yes, kind of out in front and leading that in different ways, and more companies coming in and getting other brands outside of the industry who want to be a part of what's going on here and like play a role in the future generations who are going to be coming up in that.
Yeah. I'm curious, what have you guys seen as far as like impact of customers you're working with in your business? Like, why have they been choosing to hire you and start using video in their businesses?
I think a big factor for a lot of the companies is just that they're seeing, from a workforce standpoint, they're seeing like we're aging and we're not hiring as young a talent, and we're not attracting as young a talent, and so we need to start putting ourselves in front of those people where they're at. And so you're talking about social media, you're talking about all these other platforms where video is a big part of content these days. And so brands are seeing we need to start reaching these people where they're at. And so that's where video can play a big role, is it can get to these platforms where people are at, whether it's Instagram Reels or, TikTok, even though potentially banned, who knows? There's all these different spots where you can start reaching the next generation where they're at, instead of like, well, I hope they find us,
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes me think of a call we had last week with a company, where the owners have just relied on referrals for the most part to get people into the company. Um, so they've never worked with a recruiter before, and you know have never even really considered it. Just because they've been able to rely on referrals and job posts working for them. It's not working for them anymore, though. And kind of having a conversation with them, it's like, well, what got you here isn't going to get you there. You kind of gotta move with the times, and start investing in different areas if you really want to start attracting the right people, and following just where the world's going in general. Like, if you stay stuck in what's gotten you to a certain point, you're just going to stay there and you're not going to grow anymore.
Yeah, I think video is a differentiator, and just like back when people took out billboards and read the newspaper, and it's just like, how do you continue to take that next step as a company? And videos has that powerful storytelling component, that like when you're looking to differentiate yourself from the construction company down the road, you have a unique story to share. You have a unique culture that you're proud of, right? And yet you're not able to get that in front of people as effectively, just in one-on-one conversations and communicating. Interview after interview after interview, where you talk about your culture and your core values as good as you could if in just a 30 to 60 to 90 second brand film, right? That really showcases who you are, and having that out in front that people can see, feel. That's just one of those components that has a psychological benefit, right? Like it's giving you an authentic look into the company. So why not take that step as a construction company looking to hire the best talent to differentiate yourself in that way? So that's what we're seeing.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, it's giving you an opportunity to tell people who you are and what your company is all about before even meeting someone. Um, you know, it gives you an opportunity to like tell your story before you even sit down with someone face to face to, try to get them to come work for you. Watching videos and telling them the ins and outs of your company and where you're headed, you kind of already have them interested in, why they would want to work for you already.
Kind of warmed them up a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a very human element to video as well. I think that's one of the, like Phil was saying, differentiators, is that photos are great. There's a human element to photos as well. But like if you look at like a job posting or a company about us page or whatever, it's it's so much more human and relatable and authentic to see someone actually talking on camera, to see the work being done in the field, to see like,
Yeah.
hey, what does this place look like? What are they about? Let me just hear their voice. Like, do they sound like somebody I want to associate with? Do they sound trustworthy? There's a very humanizing element that I think is really big, plays a huge part in whether it's brand awareness or trying to draw people to your company, as far as like, hey, come work here, the culture's great. We can actually kind of give you a little mini taste of what that culture is like.
It gives leaders the opportunity to get on camera as well, right? And tell and be a part of that story, because they're not always the ones making the hiring decisions either, right? Like you might be going through and understanding the brand, but like if they can hear from the top of what they're trying to build, and they can understand that there's a vision here, how they want to grow. It just gives a way more, it's like looking at a diamond and maybe you're just seeing like one, aspect of that. But like with a video, you can see so many other dimensions of the company.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Corey, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. If you have any thoughts, feel free to say them now, but also like, where can people find you, and, where can they reach you for recruiting, or just so they want to, see more of your work. So
Yeah, man. The best way is LinkedIn. Just connect with me on that. And yeah, I encourage you. I mean, if you're starting out in your career, or middle of your career, wherever you're at, reach out to me. I'll give you as much free advice as I can. Always happy to jump on a call with someone and just talk about and give thoughts about how they can go about their career, or things that they can do to improve their resume or their LinkedIn profile or stuff like that recruiters and companies are going to look at. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me if you need some career advice.
Yeah. And I would definitely encourage people to do that, because that is one of those secrets to hiring that most people don't think about, or to getting hired, I guess, is like, yeah, recruiters are one of those like secret weapons that people just don't know. They don't know exist when you're looking for a job necessarily, a lot of people. And like, it's just a wealth of information, and people like you that are, that are generous to be able to say like, hey, let's talk. Let's, let me see where I can give you some advice as much as I can. Like, I think that's awesome, and people should definitely take advantage of that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, reach out to recruiters, because it's like, you don't pay recruiters anything. The companies are paying the recruiters to recruit you. So it is a free service. You can get a bunch of free advice. So yeah, definitely do it.
Probably land in a better job overall, better culture fit, because recruiters, the skill that you guys have to be able to identify like someone who's a good fit for a specific company, and that person too, and their dreams, their hopes, you can kind of understand that more for where they're wanting to go, rather than them just looking up like, what are the constructions in my local area, or Googling job searches. I know a lot of people have just sent in like 100+ applications with no word back on things, and it's like, just talk to the people who are in there doing it, having the conversations, have built that roadmap for you. So Corey's the guy.
Yeah. And a lot of the time, one last thing here, like when companies work with agencies, a lot of the time those are kind of off-market jobs. You're not going to see those posted online anywhere. Some recruiters will post the jobs just to see if they can get some applicants, but a lot of the time those jobs aren't posted. We're headhunting for them, so we're calling specifically to get people interested in those opportunities. So build relationships with recruiters, and you're going to have opportunities that a lot of other people might not have or see online.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I think that's great advice and a great place to end. Thanks a lot, Corey. Check him out on LinkedIn, Corey Guy, and Ground Up Construction Recruiting. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks Ryan.
Corey.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate it.